mystery writers! Welcome to Write a Killer Mystery, where we learn to make a good mystery great. And today I want to talk about foreshadowing and how it's important in your mystery and how you can use it. So before we get to that, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon for their continued support. Would help bring you this series and also support my mystery writing. So if you'd like to support this video series, there's a link to Patreon in the description below. Okay, let's get to it. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing works to build reader anticipation. But the thing is, we don't want to give too much away in a mystery, right? We have to keep our villain hidden till the end. And so foreshadowing works with clues, not just evidential clues of things, but also things that suspects say and the way they respond to your sleuth. And so they're interwoven in your mystery. Foreshadowing hints at what is coming later in the story. And as the reader continues with expectations regarding the next events, foreshadowing creates a sense of suspense. And we all want that in our stories because it keeps those pages turning. So you can use all kinds of things for foreshadowing. You can use dialogue, what characters say. You can use plot events. You can use settings to forecast future events. Remember, they're just hints at what's going to happen. And they aren't blatant announcements. They're just little tiny hints. And you want to kind of plant those in your reader's mind as they go along, because this is what works at the end of your story when the reader goes, I should have known it was that character who was the villain, because you gave them all those little hints along the way, okay? So let's talk specifically about foreshadowing and the mystery writer challenge. The clues your sleuth just uncovers in a mystery serve as precursors to the final revelation. And on the other hand, the mystery writer, that's us, must figure out how to plant those clues without revealing the villain. That's our big challenge. And so foreshadowing requires you to hint, but not reveal until the end. So rather than stressing the clues that point to the final discovery, you want to tantalize your reader. Foreshadowing keeps your reader guessing. And the thing about hints is it's easy for them to forget them as they keep reading, but you've planted them there, okay? That's your job, just to plant those hints. You want to tantalize your reader while keeping the focus on the clues that point toward the final discovery. It's like secret foreshadowing to keep your reader guessing without giving away the secret about the villain. You invite your reader inside the puzzle. So I've talked about this before, how the puzzle is the main plot element that readers come to mysteries to enjoy. They want to solve the mystery before your protagonist does, but hinting and not telling is one of the ways you can keep your reader from guessing before the end. So you want to craft methods for clues and foreshadowing. You want to place the real clue before the fake one, okay? Because people remember the last thing. So if you mention your clue towards the beginning of a list of clues, it's easier for the reader to overlook it and focus on the last thing, especially if your protagonist picks up on that last thing or a suspect picks up on that last thing. Um, so it's a great way to get started with mystery clues. Just put them at the beginning and then overshadow them with other clues. So your reader focuses on a different clue. Okay, so then another way you can do this is to emphasize the irrelevant. So you're de emphasizing the clue. The reader sees the clue, but does not see what's important about it. So, for example, a sleuth may understand the value of a company report and its statistical details, but he doesn't consider that person who wrote and researched the report. So the focus is just on the wrong thing. It's another way that you can hint, all right? You can also plant a clue before it has any context, because this is something you can do early on in your story. It doesn't have any context for your sleuth, and so the reader just overlooks it. And let's see, the other thing I wanted to say about that is if you ever watched Inspector Barnaby, Mysteries by Carolyn Graham, and Somerset Murders, she does this a lot. She puts a clue in before it seems relevant. It just seems like a detail that, and the camera's focusing on something, but it's actually something very important, and we don't find that out until later. The other thing that can happen is the clue is actually completely misinterpreted by your sleuth. And if, remember, your sleuth is your reader's guide to the mystery puzzle. So if your sleuth looks at it in a certain way and misinterprets it, the reader's going to focus on that misinterpretation. I've lost my thinking track here. I'm sorry. Okay, and then things happen, but the real clue is missing. And I think the most famous of these is when Sherlock Holmes realizes that the dog did not bark in Silver Blaze. So you can have something that didn't happen be a clue, but first of all, your sleuth is going to have to recognize the significance of something not happening. These are just ideas for you, so you can pick and choose. There's quite a few. And then another way you can do this is to scatter different parts of a clue on different places in your story. So it's the same thing, but because you're presenting the whole picture in a very disjointed way, scattered in pieces in your story, it's hard for the reader to remember, and especially if your sleuth overlooks a couple of those bits and pieces, even though you put them there, the reader is going to ignore them as well. So if you take all of the pieces that appear in your story, but you scatter them throughout, it's harder for your reader to remember all the things that come together to make a significant clue. All right. So, another way you can do this is to get together a cluster of clues. This often happens in a scene where your protagonist detective is reviewing all the clues that they have so far. So there's a big cluster of clues, and many of them are red herrings, and within that is something that is the real clue, but it's surrounded by things that are false clues, as it were. Um, and you're placing the clue in plain sight, and but but the significance is hidden. I guess that's the best way to say it. Um, So John D. McDonald does this in his Travis McGee mysteries, and also, of course, Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. So uh, there's all these clues that point toward everyone, but she keeps focusing on trying to find the one. All right. Um, Another thing is to immediately draw the reader's attention away from the clue. Um, that something happens. Let's see. It's like your protagonist sees a clue or notices something or hears something that a suspect has said, but all of a sudden somebody hits her from behind, and she's off to the hospital and doesn't get back to being on the case until several days later or something. And because of all this action, the clue is sort of forgotten by your protagonist. Um, so that's immediately drawing the attention away from the clue. And let's see, Adrian McKenty does this brilliantly in The Cold, Cold Ground. Uh, the clues point toward a serial killer who targets homosexuals, but that's not even remotely close to what is actually happening. The other thing you can do is create problems with time. So at the time of a murder, the suspect has an alibi, but then perhaps forensic evidence comes in that the time of the murder was actually hours or even a day before what they originally thought, and that suspect's alibi is just totally blown. Uh, so that is something that's going to happen toward the end of your story. All right. So another thing is action camouflages the clue. Um, your sleuth glances at a scrap of paper on the floor, and then something drastic happens, and their attention is called away from that. And Joe Nesbo does this a lot in his Harry Hole uh, stories. It's one of the techniques he uses quite frequently. So there's some ideas for foreshadowing, planning your clues, hiding them, keeping your reader in suspense until they get to the end of the story. You can pick and choose, you can experiment with those ideas, but the whole idea is to hint at what's coming later without making a big announcement about it. That's the whole idea of the foreshadowing. Okay, so mystery writers have to work hard um, with foreshadowing because in many novel genres, the foreshadowing um, comes with the antagonist. People know who they are, and the foreshadowing leads to events later in the story. But the reader keeps those foreseen moments in mind. And our job as mystery readers is to push them out of our reader's mind. We put them there in the story, so we've, covered our tracks, as it were. Um, and they're there, but we're hiding where they actually point to the actual villain. So we have to work really hard at our foreshadowing and our clues. Um, so mainly, your reader may realize all the clues at the end, but you want to keep them hidden during the bulk of your novel. So that's our challenge as mystery writers, is to put them in there, put in those clues, but to keep them hidden and not call attention to them, to foreshadow. So they're actually foreshadowing, they're hinting at who the real villain is, but we're keeping them low profile until that very end, when your sleuth puts it all together and helps your reader put it all together to reveal the character. Okay, so um, once again, I want to thank Audible for sponsoring Write a Killer Mystery. And Audible is a great way for you as a writer to listen to other mystery stories. And as I've said before, don't always read in your genre, so go for it. And there's a link in the description below to start a trial with Audible and enjoy listening to stories. I just enjoy it very much. And then I have one final announcement. There's a new mini course in the Mystery Writing School. It's called Mystery Characters, Who They Are and how they work in your story. And it's all about context and story roles. It is not the traditional regular way of approaching characters in your story. And that mini course is in special introductory pricing of $25 until March 15th, and there's a link also below for the course. All right, well, that was a lot. And so keep your foreshadowing, make your clues hints, not revelations, and keep writing, and I will see you next time.